That dome on top? Just look at that dome. I've analyzed probably 60, 70 motorhome concepts over the past couple of years, and I have never, not once, seen a designer put a full observation capsule on the roof of a vehicle like this and actually make it look like it belongs there. Usually when someone tries something that bold, it looks like a mistake, like something fell off a different vehicle and landed on top. This doesn't look like a mistake. This looks intentional. This looks inevitable, like the whole vehicle was designed from the top down, literally, and everything below that dome exists to support it. Now, full transparency before we go any further, what you're looking at is an AI-generated concept design. It doesn't exist in any factory, no manufacturer built it, no one's producing it, no one's selling it. It is pure imagination rendered in extraordinary detail, and honestly, that's exactly what makes it worth taking seriously, because when a designer has zero real-world constraints, you find out what they actually believe design should become. So, here's what we're doing today. We're going full walk around on this thing. The exterior, the design language, what I think is happening inside based on those proportions, the powertrain logic, and then my honest verdict at the end, including the one detail on this concept that I think is genuinely ahead of where the industry is right now. Stay with me, because we're going to get to the rear of this vehicle eventually, and there's something happening back there that I want to save until we get there, because once I show you that, you're going to see this entire design differently. Let's get into it. The front face. All right, let's start at the front, because the front of this concept is doing something that most motorhome designers simply don't have the nerve to try. Most motorhomes, even the expensive ones, have a front end that feels like an afterthought. A big flat windscreen, some grille work, maybe some LED strips if they're feeling adventurous. The front says, "I am a box that moves." This front says something completely different. Those circular headlight pods, those deep glowing blue orbital rings on either side of the nose, those aren't just light sources, they're statements. They look like something from aerospace engineering, not road vehicle design. Each pod appears to sit inside a recessed housing, with the blue glow suggesting LED ring architecture similar to what you'd see on high-end European performance vehicles, but scaled up, made monumental. On a vehicle this wide, they create a visual width anchor that makes the whole front feel planted, aggressive, and, surprisingly, elegant. The lower front section swoops inward dramatically. There's a deep negative space carved into the chin area, not just for aesthetics, but that kind of geometry on a vehicle this large almost certainly serves an aerodynamic purpose. It's channeling air, managing it. The designer understood that a vehicle this tall creates enormous frontal drag, and they started addressing that problem right here at the nose. The side profile. Step around to the side, and the first thing that hits you, and I mean hits you, is how the glass is being used. This concept appears to be a true double-deck design. The lower habitable section has a wide band of darkened panoramic glass running almost its full length. Then above that, the upper deck, which is where it gets genuinely remarkable, features what looks like a nearly continuous glazed surface wrapping all the way around. Think about what that means for a moment. If you were inside that upper level, you would essentially be sitting inside a glass room that happens to be moving. The horizon in every direction. Mountains, coastlines, forests, not framed by a window, just there. That is not a design choice. That is a lifestyle philosophy built into tempered glass and structural framing. And it works. The blue accent lines, that continuous LED trim running along every horizontal panel edge, those aren't just decorative. They visually separate the layers of this vehicle and give the eye a clear reading of the structure. Upper deck, middle transition, lower chassis. Without those lines, a vehicle this complex would read as chaotic. With them, it reads like architecture. Aerodynamic shaping. Let's talk about what this silhouette is actually doing from an engineering standpoint, because there's more here than meets the eye on first glance. The upper module, the glazed living space, appears to have a carefully considered taper at the leading and trailing edges. It's not a shop cutoff, it transitions. That transition matters enormously at highway speeds on a vehicle this size. A blunt upper surface creates what engineers call a separation bubble, turbulent air that essentially acts like a wall the vehicle has to push through. A tapered, rounded upper section lets air flow over and around it far more cleanly. In real terms, that could be the difference between draining a battery pack at highway speed or having meaningful range left when you reach your destination. On a concept like this, aerodynamics aren't a luxury detail, they're existential. Then there's the dome, the observation capsule sitting on top. Aerodynamically, that dome shape is actually one of the most efficient geometries that exists. It presents a curved surface to airflow from virtually any direction, which means it generates significantly less drag than a flat or angular equivalent. The designer may have landed on that shape for aesthetic reasons, but the physics support it completely. Paint and surface finish. The color story here is white over black, and it's doing a lot of work. The upper module is rendered in what appears to be a high-gloss pearlescent white, the kind of finish where light doesn't just reflect, it moves across the surface as you change angle. That quality of paint finish makes a large surface feel dynamic rather than massive. It catches golden light beautifully. It would look extraordinary in an alpine landscape at sunset, and I don't think that's accidental. The lower chassis section goes deep black, almost as if the vehicle is floating. It visually reduces the perceived height of the running gear and ground clearance components. The effect is that the white upper structure appears to hover rather than sit. Psychologically, that makes the whole thing feel lighter than it is. Combined with the blue accent lighting, at night, this concept would be one of the most visually striking moving objects on any road it was on, period. The wheels and stance. The wheel configuration here is telling. This concept appears to run a triple axle setup, 3 pairs of wheels visible on the near side, and the wheel design itself matches the vehicle's overall design language precisely. Multi-spoke alloys with polished faces sized appropriately for the mass they'd need to support. These aren't an afterthought, they have presence. And the stance, the way the vehicle sits relative to the road, feels purposeful rather than accidental, low enough to feel planted, high enough to suggest genuine off-road capability. Because here's what a vehicle like this is really promising. It's not just a highway cruiser. The ground clearance, the triple axle distribution, the overall proportions, this concept is imagining a world where you drive this into genuinely remote territory, the kind of place where most luxury motorhomes would never even attempt to go. A mountain pass at 10,000 feet, a coastal headland accessible only by fire road, the kind of wild camping spot that most people can only reach in a beat-up 4x4. This concept says, what if your palace could go there too? All right, I told you to stay with me for this. Here we are. The rear of this concept is where the designer made the decision that I find most fascinating and most ambitious of the entire design. Look at how the rear of the upper deck terminates. Rather than a conventional flat or gently curved rear wall, the designer has carried that same dome language from the observation capsule all the way to the back of the upper habitable section. The rear glass doesn't just end, it wraps. It curves back and over, creating what appears to be an aft-facing panoramic window that curves toward the ceiling. I have genuinely not seen that treatment on any other motorhome concept I've analyzed. Yacht design, yes. The curved stern glazing of a superyacht is a well-established design language. Aviation, yes. The rear observation windows of certain private aircraft do something similar. But in road vehicle design, this is rare. This is the designer saying, I'm not just borrowing design DNA from automotive, I'm borrowing it from the most luxurious forms of mobility that exist. And that rear window, if the proportions are right, would mean that lying in the rear sleeping area of the upper deck, you could see stars through the ceiling above you. You could watch a landscape recede behind you as you travel. It is one of the most considered, human-centered design decisions on this entire vehicle. That's the exterior, and honestly, the exterior alone makes this one of the most compelling concepts I've looked at. But I'll be honest with you, the exterior is the easy part. What I think is happening inside this vehicle is where it gets genuinely extraordinary. We don't have confirmed interior renders for this concept, but here's what I've learned doing this. A designer who puts this level of intention into every exterior surface doesn't stop thinking at the door. So let's do what we do. Let's read the evidence and build the interior from the outside in. Overall layout logic. This is a true double-deck structure, based on the exterior proportions and specifically based on the clear visual separation between the lower chassis module and the upper habitable deck. I'm going to estimate that the total interior ceiling height across both levels combined is somewhere in the range of 5 to 5.5 meters. That's an extraordinary number for a road vehicle. The lower level, in my reading, handles the functional and mechanical. Driver cockpit forward, garage or utility storage midsection, mechanical systems, and the powertrain infrastructure. The upper level, the glazed capsule, is where the living actually happens. The upper living deck, the heart of this concept. Based on that continuous glazed upper section, the main living area of this concept would feel unlike anything most people have ever experienced in a vehicle. Let me try to paint this picture accurately. Ceiling height on the upper deck, if the dome proportions translate correctly, could approach 2 meters or more in the central section. In a motorhome, that is full stand-up height with room to spare. The difference between adequate headroom and full standing height is the difference between feeling like you're camping and feeling like you're in a penthouse. One triggers a psychological sense of confinement. The other opens the nervous system up. The light coming through those panoramic glass panels on all sides would be extraordinary at any time of day. Morning light from one side, golden hour from the other. In a forested location, you'd have a leaf canopy effect. Dappled, natural light moving across what I'd expect to be light-toned interior surfaces. In an alpine setting, you'd wake up to mountains on 3 sides with no obstruction. Imagine driving this to a remote spot in the Scottish Highlands. No hookups, no campsite infrastructure, no one within 10 kilometers, and you wake up in that upper deck with a panoramic glass showing you mist rolling through a glen, and you make coffee in a kitchen that probably has more capability than most studio apartments. That is not camping. That is not even glamping. That is something that doesn't have a name yet. Sleeping quarters. Given the rear glazing treatment we discussed, that curved aft window, I believe the sleeping quarters are positioned at the rear of the upper deck and positioned deliberately to take advantage of that view. In a concept of this scale, I'd expect a full king-sized sleeping platform, probably centrally placed for balance, with the curved rear window effectively acting as a skylight above the foot of the bed. Privacy would be managed through electrochromic glass, the kind that frosts on command, which has become standard on high-end superyacht designs and is already appearing in premium architecture. You're lying in this bed. You can clear the glass with a voice command and watch the stars. You can opaque it completely in under a second if you want pure darkness. You are in the most remote location you've driven to, and your environment is perfectly controlled. That's not a feature, that's a philosophy. Kitchen. A kitchen in a concept like this, based on the apparent length of the lower deck, would likely be positioned midship on the upper level, acting as a natural divider between the main lounge forward and the sleeping area aft. I'd expect the designer to have proposed full induction cooking, integrated refrigeration, and counter surfaces that feel residential rather than vehicular. The challenge in any motorhome kitchen is the tension between capability and weight. Every kilogram of kitchen equipment affects range and handling, but in a vehicle this size, with a triple-axle load rating, the designer had more freedom than most to propose something genuinely usable. Espresso machine? Yes, proper one. Bathroom and wet bath. Motorhome bathrooms are where most concepts fall apart, honestly. The physics of plumbing in a moving vehicle is genuinely difficult. Tanks, pumps, gray water management, structural penetrations, it adds up. In a vehicle this size, the designer almost certainly imagined something close to a residential wet room, a proper walk-in shower, possibly with the kind of rainfall shower head that requires real pressure and real tank volume to support. Given what appears to be a generous lower deck utility section, the water and waste infrastructure to support this would be feasible in a way it simply isn't on smaller builds. Off-grid capability in the bathroom specifically comes down to one number: water tank volume. A generous concept like this could potentially carry enough fresh water for several days of full residential use without any external hookup. That's the difference between a vehicle that needs campsite infrastructure and one that genuinely doesn't. Cockpit and driver interface. The front lower section of this concept is clearly the driver's domain, and based on the visual language of the exterior, that aggressive, tech-forward design, I would expect the cockpit to feel more like a flight deck than a traditional motorhome cab. High-mounted seating for elevated road visibility, a sweeping curved dashboard, probably integrating multiple display surfaces rather than traditional gauges. Given the autonomy direction that vehicle technology is heading, a concept like this almost certainly imagines a dual-mode interface: manual driving for when you want engagement, and assisted or autonomous mode for long highway sections where you'd rather be upstairs living. That transition from driver to passenger in your own vehicle is one of the most significant lifestyle possibilities that autonomy technology opens up, and in a vehicle designed for long-distance exploration, it's not a luxury, it's the whole point. Smart systems. A concept this sophisticated would likely integrate a full home automation layer, climate control zoned by area, lighting scenes programmable for time of day, entertainment distributed across both decks, connectivity managing everything from satellite internet to solar monitoring to vehicle diagnostics. The goal of all that technology is actually very simple: to make the vehicle disappear. When systems work perfectly, you stop thinking about the vehicle and start thinking about where you are. The mountains outside the glass become the experience. The technology just makes sure nothing interrupts it. Powertrain and tech. Let's talk about what it would actually take to move something like this, because the engineering challenge here is substantial, and the designer made some choices that tell us a lot about the intended philosophy. Electric propulsion, the only logical choice. A vehicle with this design language is not running a diesel engine. The aesthetic, the technology integration, the overall philosophy of this concept points unambiguously toward full electric propulsion. And in a near-future production scenario, that means a battery pack of significant size. For reference, a vehicle of this mass and frontal area at highway speeds would require a substantial energy investment per kilometer. If this concept were ever engineered for reality, you'd probably be looking at a battery architecture in the 300 to 500 kilowatt hour range to achieve meaningful range. That's roughly 10 to 15 times the capacity of a standard EV passenger car. The technology to build that exists today in marine and commercial vehicle applications. It's not science fiction, it's just expensive and heavy. The triple axle configuration becomes relevant here too. Distribute that battery mass across 3 axles, and suddenly the handling and road load characteristics become manageable in a way they wouldn't on a 2-axle platform. Solar integration. That upper deck surface, and specifically the dome, represents a significant solar collection opportunity. The designer appears to have intended integrated photovoltaic panels across the upper surfaces, which in strong sunlight conditions could contribute meaningfully to daily energy needs. Let's be realistic about what solar can and can't do on a vehicle. You're not driving 500 kilometers on solar alone, but parked in a sunny alpine meadow for a week, off-grid, no hookups, nothing around you for miles, solar collection could realistically cover your daily living energy, climate control, lighting, kitchen, entertainment. That's a genuine off-grid scenario that changes what this vehicle can do. You're not dependent on infrastructure. You're self-sufficient. That's what off-grid truly means. Not surviving, thriving. Hydrogen as an alternative. There's a scenario where a vehicle of this scale makes more sense as a hydrogen fuel cell platform than a pure battery electric. Hydrogen stores more energy by weight, refueling is faster, and range anxiety essentially disappears. The infrastructure doesn't fully exist yet for consumer hydrogen in most markets, but in a concept vehicle imagining 2035 or 2040, that infrastructure gap may well be closed. If someone were ever brave enough to actually engineer and build this, the powertrain decision would likely come down to one question. What's the infrastructure reality in the markets where this operates? Battery electric for regions with dense charging, hydrogen for long-range exploration in less developed territories. Either way, this is a vehicle that accepts no compromise. All right. My honest take. What this concept does genuinely well, the design coherence here is exceptional. Every element, the circular headlight pods, the LED accent lines, the dome, the curved rear glazing, feels like it came from one unified vision. That is genuinely hard to achieve. Most concept vehicles feel like a committee of good ideas that don't quite agree with each other. This feels singular. This feels authored. The double-deck structure is the right answer to the question of how you create genuine living space in a road vehicle without simply making it longer. Going vertical is the architectural solution, and this concept commits to it completely. That commitment is what earns it respect. What seems questionable or impractical? That dome. As much as I love it, and I do love it, I have to be honest about the challenge it creates. Height restrictions on road infrastructure are real and serious. Bridge clearances, tunnel heights, overhead utilities. In most of the developed world, a vehicle with a rooftop observation dome of that profile would face genuine access limitations. You might design your journey around roads that can accommodate it. Now, in the world of this concept, maybe that's a known constraint and the designer considered it a worthwhile trade. I can respect that. But in a real production scenario, an engineer would almost certainly ask whether the dome could retract or lower for travel. That's a solvable problem, but it's a problem. The one detail I find most impressive: the rear curved glazing. Every time I come back to it, it's the detail that required the most courage because it's not visible from the front, it's not what draws you to the thumbnail, it's not the hero shot. It's the thing you discover when you go around the back and you think, wait, who put a curved skylight on the rear of a motorhome and had it actually work? That's the detail that tells you this designer was thinking about the experience from inside the vehicle, not just the impression from outside it. That is the difference between design and styling. What I'd change: I'd want to understand the entry and exit system better. A vehicle with 2 living levels needs a staircase or lift, and the integration of that transition space between decks is often where motorhome design falls apart. I'd want to see how the designer solved the stair or lift challenge without compromising either the lower utility space or the upper living area. That detail isn't visible in this render, and it's the detail I'd most want to see. What this says about where design is heading: this concept and concepts like it are telling us something important. The line between architecture and vehicle design is dissolving. The materials, the glass technology, the smart systems, the energy independence, all of it is converging toward a world where the most ambitious place you could live might also be capable of moving. This will never exist exactly as you've seen it today. And honestly, that's fine. That's not the point. The point is what it makes you think about space, about freedom, about what mobility could mean if we had the courage to reimagine it completely. It's a concept, it's fictional, it's AI generated, and it is still one of the most thoughtfully imagined mobile living spaces I've had the chance to break down on this channel. Now, I want to hear from you. The rear curved glazing, the observation dome on the roof, which of those 2 design decisions do you think is the bolder move? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, especially in the first hour after a video goes up. And if this kind of deep dive concept analysis is what you come to YouTube for, there's a lot more of it right here on this channel. Hitting subscribe is the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next one.